So we're on the east side of San Giovanni in Laterano, which, as we've discussed, was in many ways always a kind of secondary facade. Even though Constantine oriented the church this way with its primary entrance this way, from early years and through most of its history, the main entry to the Lateran was from the transept entrance that Sixtus V gave a new facade in the end of the 16th century. But by the early 18th century, it was considered somewhat undignified that this east, ostensibly front of the basilica, didn't really have a proper facade. And so a competition was held for a new facade. And the winner of the competition, Alessandro Galilei, designed a facade that recalled very deliberately the facade of St. Peter's. So just as Sixtus V's loggia was meant to refer to the Benedictine loggia at the Vatican, so does Galileo's facade recall the later facade, the facade that replaced the Vatican facade that Sixtus would have known, with the facade that Carlo Maderno had designed. And Galilei refers back to that facade of St. Peter's in order to reinforce that connection across town, to create this kind of echo or dialogue across town between these two papal seats, essentially, these two places for the Bishop of Rome. So Galilei gave this facade enormous scale that again recalls the scale of the facade of St. Peter's, was supposed to have had its corresponding piazza with its own obelisk that never happened. But what he also gave it was this incredible skyline of figures, including Christ at the center. And it recalls the fact the original dedication of the church was to Christ the Savior, and the dedications to both St. John the Baptist and St. John Evangelist came later, but it's still known mostly today as San Giovanni. Those figures on that skyline can be read all the way across town from the Campidoglio itself. And so the scale that we get here, not only does the facade itself in its character and style recall St. Peter's, but in fact one can visually see the skyline of this facade from the political center of the city at the Campidoglio. And that would have been something that would have made a special sense for the Possessor route when one ascended to the Campidoglio and was effectively heading here to the Lateran. One would have seen one's destination over the top of the Colosseum in the distance. But why would Constantine have oriented his church this way when it seems to be so much oriented away from the center even of ancient Rome? Well, he probably did that deliberately, in part not to offend the sensibilities of those who are still loyal to the old church temples and cults of pagan Rome in the Forum, the Imperial Fora, places like the Colosseum, the great monumental center of ancient Rome. This church deliberately turned away from it with its front door. But what it did turn towards was the church that his mother had built, Santa Croce in Gerusalemme, on her own private land just east of here. Santa Croce in Gerusalemme means the Holy Cross in Jerusalem. And not only did Helena return from Jerusalem with the Scala Sancta from Pontius Pilate's Praetorium, she also brought back, most importantly, the true cross, which she discovered in the soil of Jerusalem, and the superscription, the inscription above, and she brought back the earth itself of Jerusalem. So the reason the church is called Santa Croce in Jerusalem is that you are meant to be transported to Jerusalem when you visit that church and visit its relics. You are transported spiritually, symbolically, anagogically to the Holy Land. And it makes Rome a kind of new Holy Land. But it also creates this otherworldly kind of experience, this transporting experience that not only transports you in place, but transports you in time. So many people would have visited Santa Croce in Jerusalem after a visit to the Lateran. They would have proceeded east from there. And they might then have returned back to the center of town towards Sixtus' favorite church, Santa Maria Maggiore, by another one of those long straight streets that he had built to connect these outlying pilgrimage churches back to the heart of the center of Rome, where most people lived, and the direction from which most pilgrims would have been coming from the north by the 18th century.